As the summer heat intensified, my friends and I sought refuge from the sweltering sun. Our youthful curiosity led us to devise a plan, an adventure that would take us to a hidden oasis, a small pond nestled on the outskirts of town. Little did we know that our escapade would lead to a chilling encounter that would forever change the way we viewed our impulsive decisions. Under the cover of dusk, we gathered near the edge of the property, our hearts pounding with excitement and the thrill of trespassing. The pond shimmered invitingly, a sanctuary promising respite from the heat and a memorable day of fun. Our laughter filled the air as we dipped our toes into the cool water, eagerly diving in to quench our thirst. The hours passed in a blissful haze. We splashed and played, reveling in the freedom of our secret hideaway. The world beyond the pond seemed distant, inconsequential, as we forged unforgettable memories. But then, as the sun began to finally descend, casting long shadows across the landscape, a chilling presence shattered our oasis. A voice stern and commanding pierced through the laughter. We froze, the sound reverberating through our bones, paralyzing us with a mix of guilt and fear. The property owner had caught wind of our clandestine gathering, our intrusion onto their land. Rage burned in their eyes as they approached, their footsteps thundering across the grass. Panic swept through our group as we scrambled to gather our belongings and escape the consequences of our impulsive decision. We raced towards the fence that separated the property from the outside world, our hearts pounding with the weight of impending punishment. The adrenaline fueled our desperate flight, pushing our bodies to the limit as we hurtled over obstacles in our path. Behind us, the property owner's voice grew louder, their threats echoing through the air. The sound of pursuit spurred us on, our lungs burning with exertion as we sprinted toward the safety of the street beyond. With a final surge of adrenaline, we reached the boundary, our bodies trembling with a mix of exhaustion and relief. We cast one final glance over our shoulders, the property owners standing at the edge of their land, their fury evident in their seething gaze. The experience had left a lasting impact on all of us. We had learned a harsh lesson out of the consequences of our impulsive actions, the importance of respecting others' property and boundaries. The thrill of adventure had morphed into a stark reminder of the potential dangers that could lurk within our innocent intentions. Looking back on it now as I've grown older, realistically, we probably shouldn't have trespassed just to swim in a pond during the summertime. But as kids, I think it was a combination of boredom and the sweltering heat that forced us to do such a thing. Luckily, we all made it out safe and nothing too bad happened. At the time that this happened, I was a 13-year-old female. So, this happened 2 years ago, and I was fairly naive. I was a major introvert, only friends with a few people in my class. I wanted to be social, but I preferred to be alone and to read or write. Classic nerd things. In early November, I got a text from my phone that was from a few classmates, whose phone numbers I had and around one or two I couldn't recognize. It was a group chat, asking if we wanted to hang out at night near a park by our school. My parents, being strict and paranoid, would never let me go. Luckily, or what I thought was luck, they were heading out for an overnight trip. They would be back at around 4 in the morning, so everything fell into place. Once my parents left around 8, I ran out the door and made my way to the park. The one thing that I made sure to do was lock the door to the house. My parents were paranoid after all, and it was the biggest thing that they had engraved into me. Once I arrived at the park, I noticed a creepy figure near the edge of the woods. No one else seemed to notice it, and I already had enough reputation as a weirdo who was true crime obsessed, so I didn't mention it. The night drew on and on. I was having the time of my life, ignoring the gut feeling that I had telling me to run. Every so often, I would look over my shoulder and the man would still be standing there. Around 9:45, 4 out of the 10 people there had to leave due to curfew. It was getting cold and it was nearly pitch black with a few streetlights every so often. The rest of us decided to go as well, since it felt more eerie and quiet. The place that we were hanging out at was a field that was fenced in with a few exits and entrances. A large, wide field with a small park in the back and our giant middle school behind us. The front of the field faced the empty road and the right and left sides were surrounded by forest. All of the people left were getting picked up by cars, meaning that they went the opposite way of the road, since that's where the parking lot was. The man stood by the right forest road exit that I needed to take to get home. I walked away from my group, and I tried to steady my heavy breathing. I didn't want to be paranoid, but all the true crime that I listened to was catching up to me. The man was probably early 40s, late 30s, dark hair with a beard, probably around 5'9", but at the time it seemed like he was over 6 foot. He stood about 10 feet from the exit that I had to take, so when I got close enough to it, I ran for about 30 feet through the exit and through the woods. Once I felt safe enough, I started to just quickly walk through the woods instead, or at least to get to the road. I heard a snap and a crunch from behind me. I stopped walking for a second and quickly checked over my shoulder. Around 15 feet behind me stood the very same man. He was walking slowly behind me, almost as if he was trying not to be suspicious, but it only made my fear grow. I turned around and walked so quickly that I was basically jogging. I lived about 10 minutes away from the park that we had hung out at, and I wasn't athletic enough to run home. After around 7 minutes of walking fast, I was in my neighborhood. I knew that I could run to my house if I had to, so I checked to see if he was trailing behind me. And to my horror, he was only about 5 feet away now. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I could hear his footsteps behind me thumping across the concrete as he ran too. I dove down an alleyway that I knew well and tried to lose him in a park, making my way home even longer. I could hear his heavy breath followed by his footsteps as he tried to keep up. I cut through houses, backyards, and front yards. I finally made it to my house and I flew up the steps. I looked behind me and he had just arrived at the bottom of my stairs. I unlocked the door and I burst through it, shoving it close behind me, and I heard him hit the door with his whole body. I ran around the house and locked all the windows, turned off the lights and hid in my bedroom with a kitchen knife, just in case he got in. He didn't, luckily. If this was a better world, that's where my story would end, but it doesn't. After a few months, I haven't really told anyone what's happened since I don't want to get in trouble with my parents for sneaking out or anything. I didn't go out with anyone or any group anymore and my loner status returned. I began to write horror stories as a coping mechanism, and I never went out past 7 p.m. It was around February when a classmate of mine was sharing a story of some random man following her home on a bus. She described him almost the exact same as the man who had chased me home. Another girl mentioned that he sounded like the guy who stood outside the school and tried to follow her home. I didn't join in, but everyone agreed that he was just a weird guy. He was kind of forgotten and eventually I moved on too. Around May, I was getting ready to walk to school and my mom pulled me aside and showed me a picture of the man. The guy who had stalked me, actually. She told me that he had been arrested 2 weeks ago for doing many of the same things that he had done to me, but he had escaped last night. She told me to keep an eye out for him and to call the cops if I saw him. I was shaking the whole time that I made my way to school. It haunts me to know that if he had caught me, something really bad would have happened. This story happened when I was 15 and totally reckless. I was with my best friend Alice and her neighbor Emily. We decided to try and enter clubs with our fake IDs after discreetly going out of the house by the window. After getting rejected by the security guards at the clubs because obviously we were not looking like 18-plus girls, we were wandering the streets not knowing what to do. It was around 1 a.m. and the subway was closed, and we didn't have enough money to get a cab. Plus, we really wanted to party, and Alice wanted to find a new guy because she was heartbroken from her past boyfriend. The last club we tried to enter into was in one of the areas that had a famous bad reputation in the city. It was in Lyon, France. Suddenly, a car stops next to us. The door opens and there are 3 guys inside. 2 of them turn their head and tell us, "Hey pretty girls, come with us. We have everything you need to get some pleasure. We have some drinks and we can smoke, come." The one at the back looked really muscular and was really insistent. Alice then said, "Let's go girls, it could be super fun." Then she whispered, "Please, I need some fun, I need a guy to turn the page." She grabbed Emily's arm and went into the car laughing. At this point, I was like, what the heck am I doing? I would rather die with my friends than die alone in the streets, and we all enter the car. In the car, they're trying to flirt with us, but I'm petrified. We say that we're 17 and they tell us that it's the perfect age to party with them. After 15 minutes of them driving to I don't know where, around the city, they say that they want to get some drinks, and that they want to find a cool place. Alice is super happy. Emily and I are relieved that they're going to drop us in a public place like a bar or a club, but they park the car in a car park in the middle of nowhere. They get out of the car and the guys take some bottles from the trunk, mix a lot of stuff inside the glasses and then give them to us. The one who was driving stays in the car, hands on the wheel, not saying anything. The 2 other guys start to tell us really inappropriate things, and that they're going to take us to a hotel and that we all looked like we had experience. They were around 35 and we were all 15. They insisted on saying how they would be the best hit of our lives, how they would be in beds, etc. Emily whispers to me that we shouldn't drink, but act as if we're all drinking because there might be something inside of it. Alice starts flirting back and tells them that it's kind of dangerous, but she likes it. At this point, they tell that they're never going to let us go unless we stay with them the whole night. I feel trapped and they ask me to drink insistently. I finally do it and I start to feel dizzy really fast. Everything is blurry around me. I think in a very incoherent way and my stomach hurts. The guys are looking at me as if I was a prey and they were hunting. About 10 to 15 minutes of feeling like this, I tell Alice that we should go and she doesn't look worried at all. I then think that I should sit inside the car, waiting for my fate to do its job. I open the front door and there's still the guy who drove inside. He is listening to the radio and doesn't even look at me when I enter. I asked him, "Why aren't you with your friends?" He turns to me upset and says, "Hey, I don't know who you are and I don't want to know. You told us you were 17, but you look like my younger sister and she just got into high school. I don't know why my stupid friends are stupidly flirting with you, but I'm just waiting for them to stop and drop the 3 of you in a public place. Once it'll be done, I hope I'll never have to see you again in my entire life." I was shocked and relieved. We stayed there, the both of us, just listening to the radio, and hearing the laughs of Alice to the bad sexual jokes of the muscular guy. I was so dizzy, I was melting into my seat. After maybe 30 minutes, the driver said he wanted to go somewhere, and everybody got into the car. We sat in there and went for about a 10-minute ride, while the two guys were saying what they would do to us once we got to the hotel. The driving guy told them to shut up, and that he was dropping us off in a big place with lots of people. We gave the two guys some fake names for Facebook, some fake phone numbers, and we finally got out of the car. The muscular guy who was in the back tried to grab Emily's arm, but she managed to run outside and get away. They left. The driver looked at me just before and he nodded at me. I was still super dizzy and eventually I threw everything up that I had consumed. Emily didn't believe what had just happened, and Alice was still laughing, saying that was insane. It was like 3:30 or 4 in the morning, and we finally found a real party after that. But to these two guys that wanted to do I don't know what in a hotel, I'm glad that night didn't continue. Or, like the driving guy said, I hope I'll never ever see you again in my entire life. One summer night when I was around 5 years old, my sister and I awoke to hear something through our open bedroom window. My parents were yelling loudly on the back patio. This was not a common occurrence, and when they did fight, it was not typically anywhere that there was a chance of us hearing. But this sort of thing did happen from time to time. And though the situation was mildly unusual, we shrugged it off, shut the window, and went back to sleep. We promptly forgot about the ordeal. It wasn't until years later we learned the truth about the yelling. As a near adult, I overheard my mother explaining the situation to a family member in another room. I'm a little fuzzy in the details as this all occurred a long time ago, but this is the gist of it. Apparently, at some point in the night, after my sister and I went to bed, my parents received an unusual phone call from someone using an electronic interpreter. Basically the same type of technology a person who is deaf might use to make calls and communicate over the phone. Understandably, my parents were a little surprised because we didn't know anyone who would use this service to contact us. But either way, they had accepted the phone call. I'm not sure how the person on the other line introduced themselves, or if they even did at all, but they knew the full names of everyone in my family, which was immediately very creepy and alarming. The conversation began to escalate as the person on the other end of the phone very specifically explained what our house looked like, and told my parents that they were hiding somewhere in our backyard, which was large, dark, and full of all kinds of plants and trees that made it hard to clearly see. There were too many places to look, and at this point, the tormentor made it clear that they had intentions of entering our home and dismembering my sister and I. At this point, understandably, they were beginning to become frantic. There was a chance that nobody was out there and that this was all just some kind of cruel joke, but that notion was not worth the risk of believing. My dad asked if they were really where they said they were, and what were my parents doing at that very moment, and what were they wearing and stuff like that. This infection of a human on the other end of the line explained exactly what my father was doing, which was waving his middle finger in the air. Exactly what they were wearing, where certain things on our patio were placed. The expression on my mom's face, every detail. My dad, a rough guy with a heart of gold, charged into the night, ready to kill any person he encountered. Neither of my parents had cell phones. I don't think they were even a thing at this time. So my mom took the phone, which had finally been put down by my dad, and called the police. As brave and stupid as my dad was for venturing into the dark that night, he found nothing, and when the cops showed up soon after, they found nothing too. And the police were not able to trace the call because of the electronic interpreter. which they said was a common device used by people trying to anonymously harass others over the phone. Nothing ever came of this incident, and as I said, I was not told about it until at least a decade after it had happened. Was this the work of a former friend or enemy trying to play some kind of cruel joke? Was there an actual threat in my backyard? We will never know.